Hi, welcome back to another episode of Coldstream Rod Shop. I'm Derek Fraser. In this week's episode, we're going to carry on with the 34 Ford chassis. The customer for the chassis showed up this morning, went over all the stuff that we've done so far, where the engine is, where the transmission is, and he's actually happy and wants us to put it where we left off, I think, 1 or 2 episodes ago. So basically, I've got to weld in the engine mounts, make the final adjustment on the rear transmission mount and beef it back up. There's a plate that goes on the back. I'll go through that as I get it done. There's brake lines to do and some paint touch up, and of course we've got to put the new front bushings on. I've already started just doing some of the brake lines in the back. I've got from the master cylinder back to the rear brakes done. I've covered that quite a few times before, but I mean, essentially it's, make the brake lines. There's a 10-pound residual valve that goes to a proportioning valve, which goes up to the flex lines. And then on the front, it's going to be, there's a 2-pound residual valve, a brake light, and we just plumb it up to the front brake. So we'll quickly cover that. But like I said, I've covered that topic a few times. So that's kind of what we're doing here. At the same time, a couple things have come into the shop. If you notice a couple of the boxes here, the gentleman that we're doing this project on, he also goes to the border quite often. So we'd ordered in a bunch of parts. So here in Canada, one of the things we do, you can ship free within the US. So we get it shipped to Calais, Maine, or one of the other border cities, and then we go pick the stuff up. So what we've got now for our Roadster, our front windshield frame came in. It's a 2-inch chopped windshield frame. It's from Roadster Supply. We've got the stanchions over there in a box. We have a shipment from Speedway, which is going to be flanges for the Y block. So I'm going to start, a future project will be to make stainless steel headers for the 32 Roadster. And then over in another box over there, we've got a brand new tanks, 32 Ford tank that we just came in, so we'll trial fit that. I had somebody reach out to me, want to know some measurements and some clearances, so hopefully now with that tank, I'll be able to do that for that person. Also, it looks like I might be TIG welding soon. So we've got a Miller 180 TIG welder here. I need to get a tank, I need to get a cart and a hose or whatever, and I'm going to be playing with TIG welding. I've always wanted to do it, but looks like we've got a pretty decent deal on this welder. So I know stainless steel welding is going to be a challenge, but I guess I'm up for it. So we're going to be doing stainless steel headers on this car in the future. And then over on the 40 Plymouth, we are still trying to source a S10 T5 transmission. I think we found one. So once I can get that in place and get it rebuilt, we'll get back onto this and we'll start doing exhaust and some brake stuff on there. We've got a whole stack of parts here that we've got to basically put into the back end of the car. But the 40 Plymouth basically is going to be the exhaust, the brake lines, hooking the clutch up, fixing the transmission, kind of painting it and putting the body onto it. So hopefully we'll get back onto that relatively quickly. So like I said, anyways, with this episode, we're going to focus on the 34 Ford chassis, get everything fixed up on that, and hopefully by the end of this video, it's going to go back to the customer and then he's going to bring us something else. as you can see from the time-lapse video, I took the front radiator out, I took the cowl off, pulled the engine out, and then we had the brand new urethane bushings. So I put the brand new urethane bushings in all the 4 bars. We now have the self-locking nuts on, we've got all the washers on, the front end's all tightened in. I've double checked the caster. The caster is set at 6.9 degrees. You usually want to run it between 5 and 7 degrees. So got a little digital readout that tool that I have. It's set at 6.9 degrees. We're good. Also, I did all the paint touch-up on the frame where we did the welding and the boxing and put the engine mounts in. Then in the back, as I had mentioned before, the cross member that holds the transmission in place. In the first iteration where we had the engine sitting quite a ways back, I notched out a section in the back of this. So I've since welded it back in and then reinforced the bottom of the transmission mount and gave it a good coat of black paint there. The other thing I'm going to have to do is, or I will be doing, is there's a plate that actually goes on the top of this. I'll have to notch that out so it fits the S10 transmission. We'll get that in place. Took the master cylinder and the mechanism out. Those pieces are all painted, so going to reassemble those. The one thing that I hadn't done was actually put the steering box in. So we've got a Unisteer steering box for this, and I've got it dummied in place right now with a clamp just to make sure it clears the bottom of a front sump. Why block it? It does clear it, not by much. And as I said, the owner's actually going to be running a rear sump, so there'll be about an inch or more clearance when he does that. It's in place, so going to pull the engine transmission out, jack everything back up, and then I'm going to weld that bracket in place, make some gussets along the side here and reinforce it, because the bracket sits a little bit low, just to kind of weld it in place as is. So I'll set the camera up on time lapse and let you follow along as I do that. So here we are after the time-lapse video. I installed the Unisteer bracket on the side of the frame. Now the Unisteer bracket is designed to mount up to a Vega steering box bracket. We don't have the Vega steering box bracket, nor do we need it. What I did, I basically positioned the unisteer on the frame underneath the engine. I had the engine in the frame to make sure it's in the right spot, clamped it, tack welded it, and then went about building some gussets here. You can see a triangular shaped gusset right there. So it's welded and lapped on the frame. It's welded on both sides. And then on the outside, I'll show you over here. I don't have the camera lady right now, so I'm doing my best to kind of show what's going on here. So you can see a triangular shaped gusset right up there from the outside to basically reinforce that bracket on the frame. So that's in, it's very secure, it's solid, there's no flex into it whatsoever. All of my gussets are welded on both sides, so it's in there good, so there's no issues. The other thing too, I had to make a new bar here because the one that came with it was too short. I put it in, I only had like 3 or 4 threads, and that's just simply not enough. You want to engage probably at least an inch of the tie rod end or more for the rod. So we quickly made one of those up like we did in a previous episode. Took the bar, took it on the lathe, you know, drilled the ends in, tapped it and whatnot. So that's all in place right now. Front end is pretty much done on this. The panhard bar that you see laying on the floor right there, I'll put that in and adjust it once I have the engine in under load. The front brake system, we've got all the brake lines in right now. So you can see the brake switch, the residual valve, and then she's teed off in the front, and then the lines going up to the flex hoses in the front. So the only thing I can't do for the customer is I can't bleed the system because he didn't have brake drums for the back. So he told me that everything's good. He has no issue doing that himself. So next up, going to put the engine back in the frame, and then we're going to put the plate that goes on top of the cross member here. So that has to be notched. That's sitting over here, right there. So that's going to be adjusted to fit, a couple holes drilled. Another thing that came into the shop, I still do some sheet metal work for people, as you probably all know. So a gentleman came in with this gas tank, and this is a piece of sheet metal that goes on the top of the gas tank, and as you can see, the bottom of it's pretty toast. He looked at buying one, and it's kind of like I've said before, it's quite expensive to buy some of these parts and ship them and bring them in here. So I offered to basically make a piece for him, and I'll weld that in. So I've already started, bent a piece of 18 gauge metal, put it on the stretcher, kind of have the basic shape to it. So I will weld that into that piece, hopefully have that done. I'll show you that by the end of the video. So hopefully we'll be wrapping up this 34 chassis here shortly. It's going to go out, and then something else is going to come in. Here we are, all ready for the customer to pick up the chassis for what he wanted us to do. As I mentioned, there was a couple simple things that I needed to do to the frame. All 3 of them did not turn out to be simple. One of which was to put the plate on here, which we cut away. He had asked us to remove some excess aluminum here. We put the plate on. 2 of the bolts in the front here actually connected up to, or would go into, factory inserts. The factory inserts were stripped, so basically had to drill them out and then weld some nuts up from underneath, because what we wanted to do was not have to come from underneath with a wrench. We wanted to be able to put these nuts, these bolts in without, you know, having to come from behind. So sorted that out. Then on the front end, one of the things I do, I grease up all the tie rod ends. So in this particular case, with this particular setup, the tie rod ends actually come in on top of the spindles, which is okay. The spindles are set up, the spindle arms are set up with a taper on the top and the bottom, which is fine. So in this particular case, the tie rod end comes from the top. Well, the flex line's in the way in order to grease the fittings up. So we went on the hunt. And these were quite common at one time, to pick up either a 90-degree grease fitting or a 45-degree grease fitting. Not that easy to find these days because people don't do this so much. So had to go on a hunt for one of those. Took some time, but nevertheless, got them. We bought some extras, fixed the problem. The third thing was I had to hook up the panhard bar. Now the panhard bar was put on the frame before we lowered it. So the chassis is sitting about 1 inch to 1.5 inches lower than what it was, because we changed the arc and the spring and got it down lower, because that's what the customer wanted. But what that then did was, on the front, the panhard bar, it didn't make contact with the ends of one of the U-bolts, but it was a little closer than what I wanted it to be. So had to take one of the U-bolts off and trim off the excess portion of the threads. I took about 1/2 inch or 5/8 of an inch off of it. So now, you know, the chassis will go up and down 1 inch or 2 and it won't make contact with that. But that's one of the things, like, you put these together, you put the weight onto it, and you've got to double check everything, look for clearances, check everything's tight, everything is greased, everything will turn. You know, the flex lines don't come in contact with anything. It's kind of an iterative process, especially when, you know, you change different components from chassis to chassis. If we were always making the same chassis with the same axle and the same setup all the time, you know, we could probably get this going a little smoother, but this is hot rodding. So anyways, that's it for the 34 chassis number 2. The customer is threatening to send me 2 or 3 more, either 32 or 34 chassis with either flatheads or Y blocks or MELs or Lincoln. I'm not really sure what's coming next. So he's going to pick this up. I'm going to go do some work on the 40 Plymouth until the next chassis comes in. So stay tuned for the next 32 to 34 Ford chassis coming to Coldstream Rod Shop. That's it for this video. Please like, share, tag, subscribe. Send me your comments or questions. Love to hear from you. And I'll see you next week.